Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. I am your host, Dr. Grace English, and I am the founder of Deep in the Heart Ministries. We are a ministry that exists to tackle the hard realities of this life through the power of Jesus. Every first and third Tuesday, you are going to have a new guest that you're going to hear from. And these guests will be talking about all different types of topics. But they're going to share their story with you just to show you what happened when they got real with themselves and invited Jesus into their pain and their struggle. You're going to be so encouraged because you're going to see how Jesus can bring beauty from our brokenness, healing from our heartaches, and purpose from our pain. He truly is the only one that can set us free from our addictions, our strongholds, negative emotions, and thoughts, and bring the true healing and lasting peace that only He can bring. So today, we are going to be talking about a very controversial topic, abortion. Yes, most of us don't even want to talk about the topic. We think it's political. But abortion is so much more than that. We are going to peel back the back layers of this topic and show you how abortion impacts the human heart. Today's guest I want to introduce to you is Cathy Krafve. She is a dear friend of mine, and she and David have been married for over 40 years, and they have 3 beautiful children with their lovely spouses and 9 grandchildren.
Yes.
And so Cathy, she also had fell for the lie that the abortion was the answer to her unplanned pregnancy. And so today we're going to hear from Cathy how that abortion impacted her. Cathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grace. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and the listeners do not know, but Cathy and I serve together on CARE, which is Christ-Centered Abortion Recovery and Education. Many years ago, we started this nonprofit to help men and women who've had past abortions to find healing and hope through Jesus.
Yeah.
And so Cathy served on the board with me, and I am forever grateful for your years that you spent launching the ministry with us.
That was an amazing thing to do, and I love doing it with you, Grace.
Yes.
It was a privilege to be with you in that.
And so, but anyhow, Cathy, go ahead and just tell us your story.
I'm so eager to talk to you. So I have heard you talk about abortion before, and I've heard you talk about the lies, and I had never made a list for myself, but I made notes today because I know when you and I get together, we could talk a lot, and I didn't want to overdo it. So I made a list of lies that I believed about abortion.
Yes.
But here's how it began. I had just accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior as a 19-year-old, and it wasn't long after that. I was still in a relationship. I knew that I was not going to marry this young man. I was basically using him. So you mentioned that abortion can seem like a political issue to people.
Right.
For me, it's always been very personal. But I understand, and those people that have a poster in their mind of the poster child for selfish women who have abortions, I would just say that would be me. I'm that person.
Right.
Now, I also made another list I want to share a little later as we talk about other stories we've heard about women who've been victimized by abortion. So there's a lot of things that we've learned. And the only reason I was able to hear those other, I call them sacred stories of other people's pain and how Jesus comes into that and heals us. The only reason I was able to hear those stories is because I was willing to tell my story.
Correct.
And then as you begin to get well and heal and tell your story, then other people begin to share their stories with you, as you know.
Yes, they become so comfortable with you, and it's just how the Spirit just, puts you together. And you just want to share some things that you've never talked about in your whole entire life to somebody else.
Yes. And so that's given me a great deal of confidence. But what began as just a terrible decision, a series of bad decisions, including to use this young man just so that I wouldn't feel so lonely. And then I had an unplanned pregnancy, and I panicked. And I went to the abortion clinic and by myself, didn't tell a soul. I invited I was so isolated. I was very self-sufficient. I didn't invite anybody into that process with me.
Okay.
So I took a taxi to the abortion clinic, and this was the part I was going to share with you since you're an MD. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe if this is foolhardy or just who I am, seeking truth always.
Mm-hmm.
But I went into, they invite you into the doctor's office and you confer with him for a minute. And I actually said to him, how can you do this day after day? How can you abort
Wow.
babies day after day? And I know, isn't that amazing?
You actually talked to the physician.
I actually talked to him.
Okay.
And I asked that question.
Right.
And he said, he was really offended. I mean, can you blame him?
Right.
And he said, I'm not going to, basically what he said was something like, I'm not going to tolerate your self-righteousness here. You either want this abortion and I will do it for you, or you don't want it and you may leave now.
Right. Right.
And so I had to make a decision in that moment. And of course, I really wish I'd just gotten up and walked out.
Right.
But instead, I was panicking, and I felt that I could fix the problem by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Notice that word problem.
Right.
And so I told him, no, I really want this abortion.
Right.
But for years afterwards, if the word abortion came up, I would smell this. They use some kind of really weird pungent cleanser, probably to cover the smells, you know? And I would smell that smell again. Oh, I mean, nowhere near there, but I would just suddenly smell it. Or there was I think this was probably, you could tell me more about this. I think this was an adrenaline feature, like a neurological thing that happened, but the lights had this really weird glow, like almost right before you faint, that weird glow you get sometimes with your visually.
Right.
And so the light, I was under a tremendous amount of stress. I know that.
Right.
And so the lights, so in the future when I would think about that day, or if somebody was, like if a preacher was preaching about abortion on Sunday, I would suddenly smell the smell and the lights would start to shine like that again.
Right. It's crazy, Cathy,
Yeah.
how you remember every single detail of what happened to you that day.
It's so crazy.
And so how long did
Painful.
you kind of keep this secret to yourself?
So and this is pretty typical, I think. So I want to go through my list of lies just in case anyone is ever faced with any of these, I can address them.
Yes.
One is I thought I would forget, but I saved my receipt. Because in my mind, I thought if I really forget this, it'll be like I'm crazy. So I have to keep the receipt so I can mark that this really happened.
Okay.
So I was so convinced that I would forget.
Okay.
So that, I know, isn't that just a strange thing? But anyway, it's funny the stuff we believe. Number two, I thought that my life would go on as usual, which could not have been farther from the truth.
Right.
Number three, that no one else could possibly raise my child. Number four, that my child would suffer under the wrong set of parents. There would be suffering there, and that I would feel terrible about that. Number five, that no one would ever know. And I thought that was the whole list, and then just last night I thought of three more. And so I think I'm getting to the lower level that I hadn't really ever really bothered to write down what I believed. Number six, that there would be no place in my future life and family for a child that I adopted out. I couldn't imagine that child coming back to me and that it would be a welcome reunion. I thought I would feel ashamed.
Right.
I didn't understand that I could get well. Or that I could have a place in my life for with a child that I had raised as a single mother. I couldn't picture my life going on that way. So number seven. So of course now that I'm married and I have this beautiful family, I know my people that didn't even know me then grieve for that child we lost as a family.
Yeah.
My own children that weren't even born wish they had that older sibling.
Right.
Step sibling in this case. But number seven, that I would be unable to finish college. Now I know I was actually so burnt out. It would have been better for me if I'd taken a year off.
Right.
Number eight, that I would be alone raising a child. And of course, that nothing could have been farther from the truth.
Right.
My sister, my brother, my parents, I actually knew the parents of the man that was the father of this child. They would have all been thrilled to welcome that baby into the family.
Right.
So those were the lies I believed.
Right.
And then I quit dating. I eventually married, became friends with David, and eventually our friendship turned into a romance. I married him. We had our first child 2 years later, and another child, our little two daughters, 16 months later. And then there was a 10-year gap, and we had a third child, our son. But in that initial period, I can't even remember which of my children. I think it was probably Anna that I was holding and just admiring her tiny, perfect fingers.
Right.
I was so overwhelmed, Grace, that God would trust me with a child.
Right. You
When
felt so unworthy having a
Exactly.
child
So
because of the abortion.
I really knew I was not worthy, that this was a tremendous manifestation of God's mercy towards me.
Yeah.
That he was not holding a grudge about a decision I made.
Right.
That he was prepared to forgive me for this.
Right.
So I'm holding that little baby's fingers and suffering myself. I finally realized what I had to grieve over, the loss of that first baby. I really had not, I mean, I had younger siblings, so I had been around a few babies, but not many.
Right.
And in that moment of holding my first infant and then my second one right behind her, just these two beautiful, perfect little girls, I began to see what I had chosen.
So the Lord really made it obvious to you. He spoke to you in so many different levels, Cathy. He told you how much he loved you. He told much how much he had forgiven you. He told you, Cathy, you can be a beautiful mom to these beautiful girls and to the son later that you would have. And it's just a beautiful story of God's reconciliation, you know, that Jesus knew that we were going to be foolish, that we would choose abortion when we found ourselves in an unplanned pregnancy. And for those of you who don't know my story, I too had an abortion when I was 18, and I lived with the trauma of the post-abortion syndrome, and I had no earthly idea at the time, but it truly impacted my life. And, you know, eventually I had to come to the Lord with my own confession and repentance over it so he could forgive me and heal me and rescue me.
Thank God he did, Grace. I mean, your life is so beautiful to all of us who love you.
Thank you, Cathy.
All of those, I mean, so many women have been impacted by your life. And not to mention your own beautiful children.
Thank you. And those are my greatest reward in this life. So I, too, felt like I was going to be not worthy of a mother. I couldn't love my kids. I couldn't connect with them because of what I had chosen to do many years ago. And the Lord said, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to make it different for your generation. You're going to have that relationship with your sons and your daughter that you've always desired to have. And so
I want to tell the story of how we got involved with CARE.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had begun to tell a few close, trustworthy women that I had had an abortion. After I got through counseling, I took my husband to the counselor and told him with her in the room to help me be courageous. And then I brought my parents to the same counselor and told them that I had aborted their first grandchild. I just felt that I needed to let them know that.
Wow.
So that they could experience the grief.
This was your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How did they take it?
They were really loving and understanding and they were very gracious people anyway.
Right.
But I felt like I needed to acknowledge that child for our whole family.
Right.
And I needed to put in motion some forgiveness and ask for forgiveness from my family. That's not always the case. I know that's a pretty specific thing to me.
Right.
I'm not suggesting this is like, please do this and you'll be well. But I'm saying in my case, that was one of the steps I felt the Lord wanted me to do.
Right.
To acknowledge that child to my parents.
Right.
And they were very, I think they were actually relieved that I didn't blame them.
Right. Right. I know.
You know?
Right.
So I think I mean, they were just very gracious about that and forgave me immediately. And so did David.
Okay.
But beyond that, I hadn't really talked about it too much. I hadn't spoken on it. I mean, I remember after the abortion being back in my room at the dorm and being in the shower and saying to the Lord, I will go anywhere. I will do anything for you, but don't ever make me talk about abortion ever. And what's so funny about that is, you know how God works sometimes in ways that you don't expect. I suddenly had this flash in my mind, this mental picture of a room, a huge room, like a church or something or an auditorium with maybe 200 people in it, bright white everything, white pews, white walls. And I'm at the front talking about my abortion. And I thought, Lord, no, absolutely not.
Right.
Okay, so fast forward, and I am feeling pretty good about this. Like I've been through some Bible studies. I feel like I'm pretty healed. And I had begun, when people always assume I'm very spiritual for some reason I don't understand. And I had just kind of gotten to know you through the clinic, Bethesda Health Clinic,
Right.
one of our happy place, like our favorite place on earth.
Yes.
If you don't know what Bethesda Health Clinic is and you're listening, I would pray that you would go to the website, find out what they're doing, and then call us, and we'll help you do it in your community because it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But Grace was the first medical director there. And so we've both been volunteering at the clinic. We're coming out the door one day, and you were getting to know me, and you were just praising me for how spiritual I was, and I'm feeling more and more uncomfortable. And I said to you, Grace, I'm not really that spiritual. I'm just forgiven for a lot. And you look at me like kind of funny. And I had been sharing this. Like when people assume things about me, I just told them more about my story so they would know and not.
Right.
I don't want to be a pretender, right?
Right.
There's nothing pretentious about my love for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So I just would tell them about my abortion if they were a woman. But I had learned, I had one situation where I told a lady and she almost literally fainted because it is a horrifying. The word itself covers, I'm glad we have the word we do, but it covers a really horrific experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when people this lady happened to be married to a doctor and she had 5 kids of her own. And so when I said it really shocked her.
Right.
She wasn't expecting it. So I had learned to just tell people, I'm going to say, and so I said this to you, Grace, I'm going to tell you something that's very shocking about my background. And I just want you to prepare yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you looked at me like, do you remember this conversation?
I do. We were outside the clinic.
Yeah.
I remember it just like yesterday.
Yeah. Do you remember what you did when I said, Grace, I had an abortion?
I said, well, I had one too.
You hit me on the shoulder. Have I ever had anyone respond the same way you did. You
Yes.
pop me on the shoulder and you go, me too.
I know, Cathy. And so, but I've seen women who have been through such deep personal grief,
Mm-hmm.
how much they realize the love of Jesus and the forgiveness and how grateful we are.
It's such a
to
beautiful
him.
thing. One thing
It
Kara taught me
is.
was if you can be that vulnerable with people, you will have friends that are like very intimate friends.
Right.
Just that you will love unconditionally and unfailingly, and they will feel the same way about you because you've shared your most sacred part of your deepest pain and hurt and regret.
Right.
And you've shown that you can be well from that.
Right.
And people really respond. They do. So, okay,
Mhm.
I wanted to tell that story about you. Do you remember what you said to me next?
Probably invited you maybe something to the care board.
You're so cute. No.
Oh, what did I do?
What you said to me was, Cathy, I think God is calling you to do what I'm doing.
Okay, well, something like that. So, yeah, so I must have been, had started doing Bible studies.
You said to me, I think you should talk about this in public. And I went, oh, that's the worst idea I ever heard. And then in my heart, though, it's simultaneously, I thought that's the last thing on earth I want to do. And at the very same moment in my most inner person, I thought, that's where God's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already known you well enough to know that where God shows up where you are a lot of times, Grace, like every time, both you and your sweet husband. So I knew if you were doing it and that God would be in it. And especially I knew that was a true confession. If you get up and tell your abortion story, you're really confessing your sin in a way that is truly holy,
Right.
and powerful.
Right.
It's not a blank, sometimes in groups we'll say confess our sins or whatever, like a big blanket thing. There's probably a place for that, but it is not the same kind of confession.
Right. Right.
So I knew God would honor that and he would be in it.
Right.
And I knew it would change the conversation around abortion.
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't really realize in that moment how much I wanted the conversation in our culture to change. We're just suffering so much because people cannot communicate, cannot accept other people's perspectives.
Right.
And we're all suffering as a result. So
Right.
at the time, I knew there was a problem, but I didn't understand that you can make a difference with one conversation. So anyway, you said that to me, and I thought, but it also revealed to me, because I had known from the beginning, I had just become a Christian, so I was just in the Bible all the time, soaking up everything I could get from it. And I'd already noticed a pattern from the Garden of Eden. I mean, it's the first couple chapters of Genesis, right? They're hiding. And so I had already noticed a pattern that if you really believe Jesus has forgiven you, you don't hide anymore.
Right.
You know you can just walk and be unashamed.
Right.
So I knew that when you said that, and my first gut reaction was, yuck, I don't want to do that. I knew I was hiding still.
Mm.
And so it didn't take me but a few minutes to recognize that
Yeah,
the
good.
difference was
Right.
I
That's
had
good,
never shared
Cathy.
that with
Right.
men.
Right.
I had never shared that with men. And I suddenly knew that's where I feel Jesus' blood is not enough.
Mm.
I need to get over that. His blood is
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm. His blood is enough, Cathy. Yeah. And
So it was hard.
right. And I mean, Cathy, I appreciate you sharing that because the healing that the Lord gives us, it is a baby step,
Mhm.
year by year thing.
Yes.
It's not totally like you just get it all of a sudden.
Right.
But like you just said, you just realize, wow, I am still carrying some
Mhm.
shame. What is that? What is that about, Lord?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
break me. Help
Mhm.
me to see what it is that you want me to see.
Help me be
And
courageous
so,
and step into my fear
right,
and not let Satan dominate me because I
right,
think, what, men are going to reject me? Do I care?
right,
Really?
right,
No, that's
right.
just silly.
I
So,
know.
so because I had the opportunity, I could see God was going to be in it. And even though I knew it would be hard, I went home and I talked to David. And of course, he's so supportive and loving. And he was very proud of me, if you can imagine that. It's hard to
Yes.
imagine
Right.
that a husband would be proud of his wife speaking in public about her past abortion. But he was so tender, and he still is to this day, for women who and families and men who have lost a child to abortion. It just breaks his heart. And so he was very eager to do whatever we could to let people know how tender that is.
Right.
So anyway, he was really so sweet about all that. So I started speaking in churches whenever you asked
Right.
me to.
I mean, Cathy, yeah. So how many times have you shared your story then?
I don't even know.
Lost count.
I don't have any idea. I try to share it every time I speak for the very reason that I shared it with you initially. I know I must come across a certain way, but I don't mean to. And so I just want people to know the real whole person, not just this part that looks perfect or whatever, or looks smart or spiritual or whatever. I just don't want to live in a pretension.
Right.
I really want to be real.
Right.
I love your thing, Get Real to Heal. Perfect.
Well, for so many
Beautiful.
years, Cathy, you know, so many men and women live with that secret, thinking that nobody would love me if they knew what I had done and what I had chosen. And it really affects how you see yourself, how you see the Lord, and how you see others, and how you connect with others. And so once you are able to share that secret of an abortion with a trusted friend, trusted family member, yes,
It's important.
that power of the secret is broken when it's spoken. And the enemy does not have a stronghold on it anymore.
The power of the secret is broken when it's spoken. Did you
Correct.
make that up?
I made it up.
That is so good.
The Lord told me that, actually. I can't take credit for it, Cathy. But you know, Cathy and I mean, we have seen women whose lives have been transformed when they have truly confessed and repented and received the forgiveness that the Lord wants to give them and the humanity of their child. They give a name to their child. Many of them know if it's a boy or girl. And so there's so much restoration and healing that comes from that. And so I don't want to scare anybody, you know, who may be listening to our program, who may have had a past abortion and you had not told a soul. You can still reach out. Reach out to us.
Yes.
careabortionrecovery.com. It's going to be in the show notes, careabortionrecovery.com. And you can get a hold of Cathy or I, and we would love to talk to you and listen to your story because there's a lot of pain that is, you know, still buried in you because of that abortion, and it needs to be uncovered. And so the Lord cannot heal what you are not trying to, what you're trying to still cover from Him. And so, Cathy, I really appreciate you talking about the lies because so many women believe the lies that the abortion industry tells us.
Right.
You know, and one of the lies I believed was it would never affect me. Oh my gosh, that was the furthest thing from the truth.
So toxic.
And so, you know, it's changing the hearts. It's getting people to understand, like, this is your own flesh and blood. This is your child that we are talking about. Let's let's just get real with what is going on in your life.
Yes.
And where is it, what direction should I go and make this decision to care for this little person that now you are caring? You will forever be a mother. You'll be forever be a
Yes.
father
That's right.
to that baby, regardless if it's born or not into this world. And so there are consequences that come from our decision. And so,
Yeah, it's been 45 years for me. And what I
Wow.
would give to wrap my arms around a 45-year-old woman at this point. I mean, my family would just so
okay.
rejoice to have that person in our
Yes.
family. So, and I
Right. You'll meet her one day in heaven.
and I was going to say, because you mentioned it,
Yeah.
one of the things that many of the Bible studies that are for post-abortive women do is they encourage you to pray and ask God if it was a boy or a girl. And I did pray about that, and I felt that the Lord was showing me that it was a little girl, a little brunette-headed girl, dark brown hair, and I named her. Do you know what I named my baby? Have I ever told you?
Mm-mm.
This was before I knew you. I named her Grace.
Oh my gosh, Kathy.
Isn't that
I had
crazy?
no idea.
So the first time I met
good.
you, you're
Yeah.
one of the only Graces I know. I have one other friend named Grace who I love.
Right.
But the first time I met you, I already felt partial to you, drawn to you, because I have this
There's a
little brunette
name.
baby named Grace.
That is so sweet.
in heaven.
Kathy.
Yeah, and that's sweet. I
Yeah,
love that.
That is very
I
sweet.
thought it was a little dorky, some of the stuff we did, but I think that's okay.
Well, women grieve differently, and
do.
some find closure
Yes.
through memorializing their baby.
Yes.
There's some things that the Lord will speak to you
Yeah.
on what you need to do.
And it's okay for me to think some of it's dorky and just
Right.
laugh.
It's fine.
and give people the freedom to do what they need to do.
Right.
And just enjoy the process.
Right.
And just
Right.
kind of rejoice together, which is a crazy thing to say about a post-abortive Bible study, but
Mhm.
by the time you get to the end, that is how you feel, that you're rejoicing with each other and comforting each other.
Right.
So I love that so much that CARE offers that not only to women, but also to men.
Yes.
Which brings me to something, if I don't want to hijack your program.
No, you're fine.
So
Talk
what-
about how abortion impacts the man.
Well, what I wanted to do was
Mhm.
share you may have to do that because I think you're more of an expert. But what I wanted to do was share all the different stories. So once I began to speak, even in private,
Mm-hmm.
and even anytime anybody I felt misjudged me and applied more credit to me about my spirituality and not realizing it was forgiveness, they were,
Mhm.
I wanted people to know this is not spirituality. This is forgiveness that you're
Right.
reading on me. This
Right.
empathy and compassion that I have for others comes out of the empathy and compassion that God has for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell people, and even before I started talking about it in public, we heard all these stories. I mean, it just opens the door for other people to share things with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy
does.
how
Yeah.
many sacred stories I've heard of people who are in so much pain. I call it, one of my friends one time called it the Holy of Holies. When you let people into that most central place in your heart,
Mm-hmm.
where you keep the most painful, the most tender, the most grievous fears that you have.
Right.
And that's the place where really only Jesus enters in sometimes, unless you bring that out to your friends,
Mm-hmm.
like a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
So I call those the sacred stories. And I just wanted to run through a list, and you can add to this list. I'm actually going to write down some if you have some I hadn't thought of. So we've heard women who, as young women, young girls, 14, 15, 16, who were doubly wounded because not only were they in love with a man who abandoned them in that crisis moment, but they were pressured to have sex. They were pressured by him to abort. He abandoned them. And then their parents also pressured them. So I don't know if you call that double victimization or triple or quadruple,
Right.
but they're victimized by everybody around them because well-meaning people think abortion is a solution
Mm-hmm.
and don't realize that they've really, again, hurt
Right.
the girl that is already hurt.
Right.
Okay, we had a friend who almost split out because of an illegal abortion. And
Yes.
no, do you think it's okay for me to say the name of one person that experienced that we knew?
Yes, you can.
Because I loved her so much, and she's deceased. Her name is Barbara.
Yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge her again
I know.
here
I know.
because she was so instrumental in everything that we've done together.
Mhm.
And such an influential and loving woman. You couldn't meet a
Yeah.
kinder woman.
Yeah.
But her abortion was before 1970. It was illegal, and she almost split out. And she shared that story so beautifully and openly with all of us.
Right.
We've seen women who've taken the day after pill And I had this question for you, Grace. Can you even get a pregnancy test the day after that would tell you if you're pregnant?
I don't know how that would be. Most people don't even know they're pregnant until the next month when they miss their cycle. So
Yeah.
most people aren't checking.
So everybody that takes that morning after pill doesn't even know if they're pregnant.
Right.
And yet we've met women who are carrying around tremendous grief over that.
Right.
Because even though they don't know if they had a baby or not, they feel their heart has been exposed.
Right.
They feel they've let themselves down.
Right.
And possibly a child.
Right.
And so it's terrible grief. Years and years later, they
Right.
come to care and want help.
Right.
So I would just say I wanted to include that one because that morning after pill is more treacherous than people realize.
Right. Right.
And you can be wounded and grieve for 10, 20 years, and you might not have even been pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a treachery there.
Right.
Okay, we've known people who were infertile and then found out later that their sister had had an abortion, and then they grieved because they wanted a baby so bad they would have happily adopted the child.
Mm-hmm.
We've met grandmothers who regret taking their daughters to the abortion clinic because they realized they aborted their own grandbaby.
Right.
And I was going to end with dads, Grace, and just flip it back to you because it was you that made me aware of how much men grieve and how different their grief is from us as women.
Right.
But they grieve so much, and I have witnessed that. But it was you that made me aware to be sensitive.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So men are equally impacted by the loss of that child.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times the man feels very helpless.
Mm-hmm.
There are cases where he may have wanted the baby and the woman decided, no, I'm still going to have the abortion. And men just have this way. God has created man to be the procreator, the protector, the provider for women. And when abortion happens, all of that is cut away.
Mm-hmm.
And men just so struggle. They struggle with a lot of addictions. They struggle with pornography, alcoholism. Cathy, they feel like they will never be able to be the man. They don't ever measure up. And so, thankfully, there are more studies for men who have lost children to abortion, and men are beginning to see how it's impacted them.
That's so good. I'm so glad to hear it. When you first mentioned it to me, it had offended me, like the political part of that. Like, a man doesn't have any rights over his own children. That's kind of weird.
Right.
But when you began to talk to us about it, it really flipped a switch in my mind. Like, oh, this isn't a woman's issue. This is a family issue. The dads are so impacted. The grandfathers, the uncles, the brothers.
Right.
I mean, my own son just grieved when I tried to tell my kids because I was speaking about it in public.
Right.
As soon as I felt they were old enough to process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he immediately grieved for the brother. He said he thinks it's a boy.
Right.
We don't know.
It's okay.
But I thought that was pretty cute. He just wanted a big brother. He has 2 big sisters.
Well, if it is a boy, you would just name him Grayson.
Okay, thank you. I'll tell him
He'll
you
just
said
do
that. He'll love it. He'll love it that you said that.
No.
Thank you.
It is, Cathy. I mean, anyhow, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For sharing your story with us. And so, guys, I want Cathy to share about the 2 books that she has published and what her other passion is in her life.
You are so sweet to give me a chance to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I originally wrote Marriage Conversations first, but I had a publisher tell me that I needed to write about communication, and I really didn't realize how insightful that was till a long time later. But so I went ahead and wrote this book too, and would you believe this is the one that the first publisher picked up? So this book got published first, and this one got published second.
Yes.
This one is, I love both of them. I honestly don't, my kids tell me, Mother, quit saying this. I don't think I'm a great writer, but these are great books. I had excellent, amazing publishers help me with this.
Yeah.
And so they turned out so much better than I ever expected. This one is on the ways Jesus communicated with the woman at the well, how he took her from being isolated to influential. And it's amazing some of the stuff he did. We really need this in our culture now.
Yes, we do.
Oh, and also I love it because it tells you why men should listen to women. And then this one is really how to hang in there when your marriage is tough. And we all have moments like that.
Right.
So I love this book. It's not judgmental. It's really, I just share a lot of personal family stories from Dave and I, and also from my parents.
Mm-hmm,
So I hope it's inspiring. It was really fun to write. I actually wrote it for my children first.
Yes. Thank you,
So,
Cathy.
yeah, thank
And
you. You're so sweet.
you could find her books on Amazon.
Amazon, or you can come to my website, or both my publishers have it there too. But I would say go to Amazon first. That's the easiest way to find it.
Great.
So
You are welcome. Again, I do want to encourage anyone who's had a past abortion who needs healing to please contact Cathy or I, or careabortionrecovery.com. And so you will find the help that you need. And Deep in the Heart also, and I did not mention this earlier, we have been hosting women's conferences for the past 3 years. And we have recorded all of our speakers that have talked on a variety of different topics. And one of the speakers that we had 2 years ago, Erin Owlett, she shared her story of growing up in a pastor's home. She got pregnant, chose an abortion, and how her life, went on after that. And her story is so powerful. And I encourage you to go to the Deep in the Heart Ministries, our YouTube page, and you can find Erin's testimony there. And so one other thing I do want to mention is that this podcast would not be possible, unless we had our generous donors. And so if you feel led to partner with us financially, please give to deepintheheartministries.com. We would love to have your support. And so join us the next Tuesday, where we'll have another new guest, and let me know if you have a topic that you want to discuss. You can reach me at grace@drgraceenglish.com. Grace@drgraceenglish.com. Thank you.